Dill, I have bad news. Chris had a conflict, so we're not going to be able to do Ben and Arthur for our Pride Month episode.
It's okay. We could just move it to August.
Okay. I'll inform the Alphabet Mafia that we are moving Pride Month to August.
Okay. Now we still have to do something for June though.
But what? Everything that we have planned has tie-ins, so we have to do it at specific times.
Oh, I got it. Maybe we can do Street Fighter. Finally, we can do Street Fighter.
Dill, I've told you, we already did that one. It just hasn't happened yet.
I still don't understand that.
I don't have time to explain it to you like you're a 5-year-old, Dill. We need to figure out June.
Oh, I got it. Okay. Oh, so there's a new Indiana Jones movie in theaters right now, right? So maybe we should do Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
But I legitimately like that movie.
Shit, me too. But it still has a reputation.
Dylan, I've heard this bedtime story before, and I don't buy it.
I still think people would like to hear our thoughts on it, though.
It belongs in a museum.
So do you.
Oh, wait. I've got it. We do a new kind of frame wreck. We redeem a movie we love instead of trashing a movie that is bad. A redemption frame wreck.
What a story, Mark.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Framewreck Redemption Framewreck, whatever you want to call it. This is a new edition of Framewreck. We're still going to call it episode 19. It's our 19th edition of Framewreck, but it's a very special episode, Matt, and we kind of alluded to it in our cold open. But Matt, what is so special about this episode in particular?
Well, we've done plenty of episodes where we went over movies with bad reputations, and a lot of times we find them to be bad movies that we love because they're bad. Yeah. And sometimes, in rare occasions, we find that, wait, these are actually pretty good movies, and we kind of give them a bit of a redemption.
Yeah, like Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Like Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Yeah. We also did the same thing with the
first Twilight was
the first Twilight and Super Mario Brothers.
Super Mario Brothers, yeah, that's right.
So we do that, but this is not going to be that either. This is a movie that we're going into this movie knowing it has a bad reputation and knowing both of us actually like this movie. So
yes, this is not some big light bulb moment realization like, wait, is Crystal Skull actually good? We're going to tell you right now. And I know a lot of you probably are hate watching this because you hate Crystal Skull. And some of you do love Crystal Skull. Even if you hate it, I implore you to stick around because we are two people. We're only two opinions, but we enjoy Crystal Skull. We actually love Crystal Skull, and we're here to tell you why. So this is going to be a fun episode, fun treat.
Yeah, and we're not telling you you're wrong in your opinion on this. This is just our opinion, and if you don't agree, honestly, I care, but don't be rude to us. That's all I ask. You can tell us all how you disagree.
Yeah, exactly. Your disagreement with us will not change our minds, but it's also not like we're telling you have to agree with us either. You let us know in the comments why you don't like it, but don't tell us we're wrong because we are right in liking it. You are wrong in disliking it. Or you are right in disliking it. Sorry. No, wait. Sorry. I was just doing opposites in my head. No. You are right, and we are both right. We're all right because it's our opinion. And we're right in our opinions because they are our opinions. It's something we could go down a rabbit hole on. But, if you don't like a movie, you are right in not liking it because that is who you are, and vice versa.
And somewhere in there, Dill was right about all of that, but not all of it, just some of it.
Yes.
Who knows?
I'm not even edit it. We're going to show our raw, authentic selves today. But yeah, this is an episode for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, part of a little franchise you may have heard of called Indiana Jones. We actually covered on our 1981 episode Picture This, Chad and I last month, we covered Raiders of the Lost Ark. And then I also reviewed the new film on the channel. So this is going to be a fun little companion piece just with all the Indiana Jones stuff going on right now and spreading that positivity because this was in place of our Pride Month episode. We're a few days behind June, but we want to keep things happy, keep things going, keep things fun.
And as we said in the cold open, we are going to be doing Ben and Arthur, which was planned. We're just doing it in August, and we're not doing it next month for reasons I will tell you at the end of this episode, and I'm excited about. Yes. Let me just start off by saying I have a bias toward these movies.
Yeah,
The
Steven
first movie-
Spielberg pays Matt.
No, I wish. No, I don't. He doesn't have to. I love these movies for free. No, when did Last Crusade come out? 1989, I believe.
89. Yep. Your favorite year.
I was 5 when Last Crusade came out, and I fell in love with Indiana Jones back in 1989.
Wow.
I throughout my life, I've watched these movies. I know them backwards and forwards. I've watched them so many times. In 2008, when Kingdom of the Crystal Skull came out, I was beyond excited. My favorite character. I've got three top favorite fictional characters.
Can I guess?
Yes.
Batman, Samwise Gamgee, and Indiana Jones.
Yes, that's correct. Those are my 3 favorite fictional characters of all time. And I was beyond excited about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull coming out. I went and saw it with a group of friends. We all loved it. I'm going to talk about the reception it got, so I'm not going to go into who all loved it. I bought it. I watched it several times. It wasn't until a few years later that I started to hear people talking about how there's only 3 Indiana Jones movies. All that piece of crap, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I didn't understand why they were saying. I was like, no, but we all love that movie, right? Oh, we didn't all love that movie. That's weird. I've come to learn, especially because I have seen the new Indiana Jones movie and loved it too, and won't hear cross words about it, that I am incapable of not loving Indiana Jones movies. So that being said, let's talk about this movie.
Yeah, well, can I throw in my disclaimer as well? Because
yes.
I come at it from a little bit of a different perspective, only because like I didn't grow up on these movies like they were regular medicine every week or every year type thing. It was very much like I had seen, I think, scenes from the first one when I was younger. Probably the first one was probably on, but like, you know, I didn't have it memorized or anything. Crystal Skull, when it came out, I wasn't like this enthusiastic Indiana Jones fan, but I watched it. I really enjoyed it. And I was also a Shia LaBeouf fan from Even Stevens, all this stuff. Even though I have my own personal story about Shia LaBeouf that is not going to be said on this channel that I'm sure we've talked about. I don't know. Just you've probably heard the story, but it's funny because I watched it and I too didn't really get that perception that it was bad. It was more so just like, you know, it was different. People had qualms, and we'll get into it, but like I didn't really pick up on that perception until later as well. But it wasn't until the pandemic where I actually like went back and like watched the Indiana Jones movies, because like there were scenes that stuck out of my brain, but the holes weren't there for me, to where like when I rewatched, I was like, no, these are freaking fantastic. And I actually skipped Crystal Skull because I thought it was gonna be bad because I had heard all the perception. And then this rewatch was my second watch ever of this film.
Oh, wow.
So I actually, so like this film is the one I've watched the least. But even the other 3, I really didn't like fall in love with the franchise till the pandemic. But then it's like when you watch something and you're like, wait, no, I do remember this from my childhood. That's kind of how it was. It was like unlocking a stored back, you know, random memory from my brain. So I'm not as like unapologetically unconditionally in love with it as you are, but like I love these movies as well. And everyone who's seen other shows here on the channel knows Steven Spielberg is also my favorite director, so like that also helps a lot in like me loving these movies unconditionally, or at least almost unconditionally. I can't say that word when I'm sitting next to you, you know, or sitting in a Zoom window next to yours, because we're not actually sitting next to each other. But you know what I'm trying to say. So a very different perspective, but I agree. Like I think there's just something about this franchise that, like, flaws and all, I still love. And there are flawed moments in other films. Like we can get into that at some point too, but like, or maybe we won't because you love them all. But like, there are elements of Temple of Doom that have aged poorly. You know, there's an element of Last Crusade that I'm not always a big fan of. But like at the end of the day, I love all these movies a lot. So
let's start with where we normally start with, which is who made it and how it was made. This was written by David Koepp, directed by Steven Spielberg. Now, to tell you about how this was made, I do need to go back to the originals, to Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was always intended to be it was a play on the serials, the adventure serials from the 1930s and 40s. For people who don't know what the serials were,
It's not Cheerios.
No, the film serials were short movies, usually around 15 minutes or so. Usually a one reel movie, film, or one or two reel film. You would go to the into the theater. You'd pay your nickel or however much you paid back in 1934 or whatever. You'd go in, you'd watch this short movie, and then it would say, "Come back next week." Will this person get out of this scrape? Will this happen? Will they survive? Find out next week at the same place.
Yeah, it's almost like soap operas where it's like they make so many that it's like, you just keep watching and watching and watching and watching and keep cranking them out. Yeah,
right, exactly. So then you'd come back next week and you'd watch the next installment of. I mean, it was TV series. It was TV series before TV series were a thing.
Right.
Like it was. That's essentially what they were. And a lot of those serials, they upped the tension, they upped the action. They went beyond what you would normally see in those type of things. And a lot of it's based on those old pulp adventure novels, and some of it's based on kind of what was popular at the time. When these were popular around the time that the Robin Hood, Errol Flynn Robin Hood movie was out. Like a lot of the stuff emulated that action style.
Very swashbuckling. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of swashbuckling, a lot of that kind of stuff. And there were all kinds of different. There's a couple Batman serials which I have on DVD, and I love them. But
I think the key element is also that they were kind of like existing in our world, but also being a little otherworldly in the sense that they were genre pictures or mini pictures, like they weren't necessarily these like dramas, that you weren't going to get a courtroom serial, you know what I mean? And I think that's also kind of will be a big factor when we talk about a lot of people's criticisms with this film in particular, is that element of otherworldliness. And I think that's important to note. Yeah.
So with the first three movies, that's essentially what they were making. They set it against World War II and had this archaeologist who is having these adventures, finding ancient relics, that kind of stuff. With that whole serial films mentality going into it. Years later, when they're going to make, when they are, and this was actually in the works since, like it had been, are we making the next movie? That had been the question since Last Crusade came out. But Spielberg kind of felt like they had finished telling the Indiana Jones story. Yeah. Ford kind of felt like, hey, I'll do more, but I kind of feel like we told the end of the story, and that's fine if that were the end of the story.
And at that time, also trilogies were a big thing. You would just come off of Star Wars, so it's like you weren't used to getting more than three. And I know Star Wars is like really the only other big like trilogy at the time, but like James Bond was really the only film series where like they made so many of them, and even by then they hadn't made a ton. So yeah, it was kind of like unheard of to go beyond three, because it's like the whole 1, 2, 3 act structure. It's like you're done, you get your first, second, and third act, even though the second act here is a prequel to the first act, essentially. But you know what I mean? So that was also kind of a mentality as well.
Right. And so they kind of, it's kind of always there. Like, are we going to do more? When George Lucas is the one who's just like, hey, I want to make another one of these. But instead of going with we'll still do it in the same style in that adventure serial style, but as far as the MacGuffin this time, let's base it more on what was popular at the time that this take place, because what they did in the other ones was basing it on what was most popular during the time frame during the 30s when this was taking place. They're like, by the time we get to the 50s and stuff like that, you got a bunch of alien pictures coming out. You got alien books. It's what it's all about. It's about the movies and the books and the entertainment. A lot of it is about aliens, and a lot of that has to do with the fear over the Russians and stuff like that, like
Cold War,
what's
yeah.
going to happen, the uncertainty of the time period lent to sci-fi being a big deal. The pulp novels at the time, which is what the 1930s movies were based on, with the pulp novels of the time, pulp novels of this time period were aliens. That's when you got really heavy into sci-fi. So he was like, we're going to shift into that I want to shift in that direction. But Spielberg and Ford like weren't really like, they were like, I don't know, it's not Spielberg's big issue, and it's the one that I have always used as an argument for this film, which was they were like, he was like, isn't it a little on the nose that Spielberg and Lucas are going to make an alien picture? Like,
right, it's almost too comfortable,
yeah.
Spielberg had E.T. and Close Encounters, Lucas did Star Wars, so like, space and aliens were not far from their, cup of
right.
tea.
And my point was always like, guys, they've been making movies together for 30 years. This is the first time they've made an alien movie together. Like, it was gonna happen. These are
Right.
the names in sci-fi. Like, but eventually they found a good. They found what they were looking for in terms of the story, and they went with it. Paramount had a 5-picture deal with them. They said to make 5 movies, and as of now they've done it, so
right,
they were able to go and make
King. And even when Disney went on to purchase this franchise, Lucasfilm in general, Paramount still was able to get credit on all 5, like as a producer almost. So we even see in the new one that's like a big talking point, because there's a Paramount logo that no one expected to see right after a Disney logo, right before a Lucasfilm logo, which is a little bit jarring. But Paramount was in Indiana Jones before Disney was.
Yeah. That is how this movie came to be. Right. So now that we've kind of discussed that, Dyl, let's talk about what you've been alluding to here about
realism.
Yeah. So go ahead. What are the things that you hear people say about this that you want to talk about?
I think the best thing to do for this like Framewreck Redemption episode is like look at what people do think, why people think this is like so bad it's bad movie, and then counter it with what we think in response to that. And I think the biggest thing that I've heard people say consistently is aliens. That's so unrealistic. And I have an argument. Watch the first movie again, because the things you dig out of the ground usually don't disintegrate Nazis and melt their skin off of their bones. Watch the second movie. People usually can't reach inside someone's stomach and pull out, or someone's chest and pull out a heart without having surgical equipment or a blade. Go to the third film and tell me that you can actually drink something that would, again, disintegrate a human being. It doesn't happen. And I think that's where I think a lot of this criticism stems from. There are things to criticize in this film. It's not a perfect film. Right. But realism should not be one of those things, especially like what you said. It's paying homage to an era, especially serials of an era. And it's 2 people who have made sci-fi pretty prominent in their careers, taking on a new leap into sci-fi. Like, I just don't think that should be the main talking point, is that it's unrealistic. I mean, like, That's like watching John Wick 4 and being like, this guy doesn't die, because that's the universe that this like universe sets it up, is that like he's invincible to a point, like that's kind of the idea. You kind of have to like suspend your disbelief here. That might have been a bad example. I won't spoil that film, but you know what I mean. It's like that. You kind of have to go into Indy knowing that some stuff is going to be a little larger than life. Now, is it still based in some realistic things? Yeah, like there's a realistic sense of time and place, and the actual textures of everything around it. And we'll talk a little bit about that and actual filmmaking of it. But like, it's always felt grounded, but never 100% realistic. And I think that's a thing people don't necessarily understand, or at least they're not willing to understand.
I would like to posit this.
Yeah.
That aliens as the MacGuffin is the most realistic thing in the Indiana Jones movies. Only because, and this is not whatever you believe. This is not a religious argument, but based on the size of our universe, there's almost certainly life out other than us in the universe. Whether they visited us is really the talking point here, I guess. But the point is, there are probably aliens. The other things like the Holy Grail is obviously most likely a legend. I mean, even if you're a Christian, you believe in all that mythology, that's still Arthurian legend.
Right.
That's not even
does,
Christian legend. It's Arthurian legend.
Like a cup may have existed, but like, did the cup actually do what it does? Maybe not.
Right.
Maybe not. But again, there's more proof here than there is in any of the other circumstances.
Right. So I would say it's the most realistic. Now, when we talk about realism, I'd like to talk about a few other aspects of it. Let's start with toward the beginning of the film and the fridge, the atomic bomb and the fridge,
which is another talking point that like I feel like a lot of people like I didn't even realize was a huge criticism until I've read like every Letterboxd review and they're like a fridge. I'm like, yo, I think it's cool. Anyway, continue, Matt.
I think it's cool too. And here's my argument against it. Is it realistic? No. And to me, it's not even that the fridge wouldn't shield him, because maybe it would. I'm not a physicist. I don't know exactly how that would work. The most unrealistic portion of that is that I don't think he would survive the impact,
the launch. Exactly.
Exactly.
He gets launched pretty freaking far, but it's like. So what did people expect? Did they expect for the fridge to fly, the fridge to open up, and this dead body to roll out of it, and then credits roll? Is that what they wanted? Because I think I would have been a lot more disappointed if Indiana Jones died in a fridge in the first 10 minutes. That's just me.
And when you look at that, and listen, I'm a big. This has always been my philosophy with movies, books, anything. The movie sets the rules, including rules about physics. Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't have to explicitly state the rules, but it sets the rules until it breaks the rules. If it breaks the rules that it sets, then it's a problem.
Right.
If it sets the rule that Indy can survive something like that, then Indy can survive something like that. And they set that rule not in this movie, but in Temple of Doom, when they jump out of a plane in a raft, and a raft that doesn't inflate on the bottom, it inflates on the sides, and then they land on the ground from a plane and survive that without any broken bones.
Yeah.
They set that rule there. Mm-hmm. This is not any more egregious than that, in my opinion.
Yes.
If there's anything about this, if there's anything about the atomic bomb itself that bugs me, it's that in order to not be just vaporized by it, even after it's like have long-term effects from something like that, you should be able to cover it up. You should be able to hold your thumb out, extend your arm completely, and cover the mushroom cloud with your thumb, in order for you not to feel effects from the fallout.
Wow. Okay.
Which, I mean, you'd still, with the wind, you still could fall, but that's how far away you need to be from the mushroom cloud in order to observe it without really being worried that you're about to be radiated, insanely radiated. And he was way closer than that when he got out of the fridge. But again, they set the physics.
And again, like, this is something I think we'll bring up a lot too, is like Spielberg knows what he's doing and how he's crafting these things too. So like, even if it's not realistic, the way it's presented, like, I think it's really cool. He's like in that town, you're like, there's a mystery around it, and then like as soon as you see that all these things are fake and that it's like a fake town, like that's kind of where it all clicks, and you kind of get that realization, oh shit, something's about to happen, he's in the wrong place, it's very Area 51 shit, like, and I love that just the way everything is staged here too, because that's the thing, it's like things can be realistic or not realistic, but like if they're presented cool in an interesting way, like I'll still like it. And I think that's the thing, is like Spielberg, he knows what he's doing. He's Spielberg. And like people are acting like a different guy took this movie and made it shit. It's like it's the same guy. And like granted, sometimes it hurts to have the same person working in the same franchise over and over and over again. But at the same time, I feel like a person like Spielberg, who has at this point in his career already won 2 Oscars for Best Director for Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan, should probably know what he's doing. And I have trust in that. And I think that sequence itself is just really well made and very interesting visually as well.
I agree. A thing I really like about the way that whole section was set up was that you discover, in this way it should be, but you discover all of this as Indy is discovering it. When he sees that town, you also feel relieved that Indy is able to find is able to be rescued or whatever, is able to finally stop being chased, maybe. Mm-hmm. And then he goes into the house, and you are as surprised as Indy that he is in this house. Mm-hmm. I love the way that section unfolds. Yeah. And then it ends with him in that fridge. But that feels so Indiana Jones. That's the thing about some of these, is that they feel so much like something that would happen in one of these movies that it confuses. Like, I wonder what people expect from these movies if when they feel when the thing they hate feels so much like it's supposed to be in one of these movies. Right. Okay. Do you have any other examples of realism that you've heard people talk about?
No, I mean, like the actual, I think this plays into one of the criticisms I have with the film, and that is the CGI. I've heard a lot of complaint about that, and I think that aids in some of the realism. I think if, the more practical something is, the more convincing it is, even if it is realistic or not realistic. And I think the fact that the CGI at the time doesn't hold up as well makes the stuff that is not realistic even more otherworldly and kind of like uncanny valley, to where I can see why people now watching it would be a little off put by it. But I think at the time, like, a lot of filmmakers were experimenting with this kind of CGI. Lucas himself did it with the prequels, and those don't look great, but people still love the prequels, at least certain people. I do. And then, like, a few years later, Scorsese would do it with Hugo, which is very much centered around reality, but still has a lot of CGI, and a lot of it does hold up and a lot of it doesn't. And I think that's like just the thing where, I think some of the technology hurts in making everything a little bit more believable in this universe. And I think that's one of the things that holds it back at times. But who's to say that the technology in this newest movie is going to look great 10 years from that? Or, who knows, when you're exploring new technology, who knows what it's going to turn out to look like. And I admire Spielberg, for at least going for it and using that technology. And like, it doesn't always work. And sometimes it makes it a little obvious that things are not in that world, don't feel like they belong in that world. There's less grit, there's less texture from the ground they're walking on. But at the same time, I still think enough of it is well done and practical enough to where those moments of CGI do stick out. But ultimately, I think it would still feel just as realistic or non-realistic with or without the CGI aiding it. You know what I mean?
Here is my kind of take on that, and I'll segue this into my next little point about this, because it does kind of fit. My take on this is that I think it fits into the aesthetic of what they're going for. Now, would I prefer it to not, and to just look better? Yes. I don't really hold it against it that much, because, all right, so watch Jason and the Argonauts, watch Clash of the Titans, not the remakes, the originals. The like claymation skeletons fighting them and stuff like that. That's the kind of movie that they're that's the kind of movie that they're emulating in these movies, is that kind of adventure thing that doesn't always have the highest budget or doesn't have the most realism, but is but works with what they've got.
Hmm.
Now that's only a little bit excusing it, because I agree the CGI in some of this doesn't exactly hold up, and it's kind of glaring. But I would say that doesn't lessen this movie for me at all, because it does kind of give it a feeling that is similar to what they're going for.
True. Yeah.
Which leads me into another part that people complain about a lot, and it might be realism. I don't know what their problem with this is, because all I ever hear is Shia LeBeouf friggin' swings with monkeys. Swings with the vines. That's all they ever mention about it, as though that is the criticism. Like, that's the problem, is that he's swinging. Go watch any of those. If you've, I don't know. I don't have ones to recommend to you. I used to like find, like, I used to be able to like watch like DVDs with some of these serials on them, and videos from back when I worked at the video store. I've seen a lot of this like stuff. I can't direct you to what to go watch. I can tell you that, okay, like the original black and white, like
Tarzan,
Tarzan movies. Exactly. Tell me that isn't what that scene was. It's including the green screen and him moving in front of what's obviously not the same background that he's actually in front of. That's what those movies looked like.
Yeah.
That scene feels so much like an adventure, like one of those adventure serials to me. It's almost, to me, again, almost what these movies are. And I wonder what you expect if this is your big criticism. I wonder what you expect from an Indiana Jones movie if this isn't exactly the type of movie that they're trying to make out of all of the Indiana Jones, not this one, all of the movies. That's why he swings with his whip. I mean, that's part of the thing. That's that's less realistic than the vine, him swinging with monkeys on the vines, the swing with the whip. But we just accept that because that's what Indiana Jones does.
Right, exactly. It's what Indiana Jones does. And you actually brought up a good point. Like, I think the visuals, that was always my harping point too. But you're right. Like, if you're staying true to the spirit of these serials and what you're paying homage to, then maybe the visuals at this point in serial making isn't as good. And like, yes, like, does Raiders look more lived in because the effects are practical? Yes, but that's also because the serials that it's paying homage to were maybe a little bit more lived in. Whereas here, we're experimenting with new technology, just as some stuff when they were making the sci-fi films, we're experimenting with technology. It almost kind of mirrors how technology evolved in it itself. And it's a cool kind of observation of, a certain time and place in history and what it's paying homage to. So I love that point that you made, that the CGI looking bad almost helps in what it's trying to mirror.
Right. And when you talk about like Raiders feeling more lived in and feeling, like that being setting it apart, I will say, I will make 2 points. Number one, Raiders has been updated. When we watched Raiders back on VHS, you could see the reflection of the snake whenever he landed on the floor of that thing in the glass that was in between them. So it's not like everything was perfect in Raiders. They have updated those things since it's been gone from VHS to digital or to DVD. Second point that I was making was that, I mean, yeah, it does feel more lived in the environments and stuff like that, but you still have the face melting scene, which is again one of the greatest scenes in in history. It's not super realistic. In fact, it looks like a practical effect. I think that's what makes it. I think that's part of what makes that scene so great, though.
Right.
And it's better. I will say it's better than the CGI in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I agree with that, but it is still part of that same aesthetic that they have throughout the movies.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, that the swinging through I don't understand that criticism. It's not only in line with the movies, it's in line with the source, it's in line with the tone. It looks like something from these movies. So that's my big thing there. Did you have anything else regarding realism?
No, I think we touched on the realism. I do want to talk a little bit more about other aspects of the film, though, because there are other things people criticize, not just realism. So, Matt, what are some other areas you wanted to cover? Because we're here to redeem them.
Yeah, let's talk about and talking about this person's performance is not an endorsement of this person. So when I say that people complain about Shia LaBeouf and his character Mutt, and I think that I'm not endorsing Shia LaBeouf as a person. Having said that, I think he gives exactly the right performance in this movie that he is supposed to give. And
yes, you can have.
He's a good actor. Like
I say, you can have beef with LaBeouf, but you can't have beef with the Mutt.
Yeah,
sorry, I just I've been wanting to say that.
No,
beef with LaBeouf. Sorry,
it's good. It's good.
Buff is beef in French. Anyway,
yeah,
you can have beef with the beef, but don't have beef with the Mutt. I love how his name is Mutt too, because it's like kind of that idea of like he kind of didn't want to be attached to his parentage because he almost feels ashamed of it and embarrassed. Because a mutt is what you call a dog that doesn't have a defined breed, because he's a little bit more of a rebel. Not saying dogs without breeds are rebels by any sort, but it's like a cool use of the name. It feels very spiritual again with the serials. This character named Mutt. Would anyone normally be called Mutt? No, but like who cares? It's a fun name. I like it a lot, and I like how like. I at least think it's pretty obvious early on that this is his kid, but then like especially when he says like, "Oh, my mom sent me here," it's like, and then Mary is so close to Marion, like but like it's fun to see them kind of like then mirror each other to then finally have that realization of, or at least Indy has a realization of who this kid is, and then like seeing that bond carry on, because part of what makes Last Crusade so good is that father-son bond, but now we're seeing it from the other end, where this guy who felt deprived of a father figure is now having to be a father figure for someone else. And I think that's a really cool playful device here, and I think that's what makes Mutt's character a very interesting one. And I really like that dynamic between the two of them. Now you may have been talking about Mutt's like on his own as a character, but I really think the dynamic with Indy is what makes it so interesting. And it's really cool to see, again, also this updated time period. He's a greaser. He's got the leather jacket and the motorcycle, which is a little bit more edgy than Indy himself, who carries around a whip. And, it's a different time period too. And you kind of see that parallel as well. Like, I really like Mutt as a character, and I like the relationship especially. I think it's a really, really good choice. Yeah.
I agree. And first of all, I just want to mention, and I thought you were going to touch on this when you were talking about his name, because I agree with everything you're saying about his name. That makes that such a good name. But we also have to mention that we called the dog Indiana. Indiana was the name of their dog, the name that Henry Jones Jr. picked, and Henry Jones III picked a dog name also himself.
I never made that connection. See, there's some fun stuff going on, y'all. Fun stuff.
So yes, so there's that. I would also like to point out that the time frame and how he was a greaser. I think that not only lends to the the type of character he is, because he's a rebel. He's kind of had to make his own way without this father figure. But it's also just like the time period. Like, he's our friend Alan, who I hope is watching this, recently called him the Fonzie wannabe, and I think that's very reductive. I think that he's he dresses like that because and Fonzie dresses like that because that's how greasers dressed at this time. Yeah. And
I think it works for the character that he's like still not the coolest, but he thinks he's the coolest because again he's this kind of dumb kid, not even dumb, but like he's young, he's a kid.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of the dynamic is really great. He's just as headstrong as his dad, and that causes them to butt heads. But he also is like full of adventure, and he's ready for these tasks, and he's knowledgeable because he spent so much time with the Ox. Like, there's just so much about that character that just works in this movie for me. So that's the criticism. Plus, again, not an endorsement, but Shia LaBeouf is really great in this movie. I mean, Shia LaBeouf's a great actor. It's unfortunate when turns out that really great actors are D-holes, but
no, I agree. He gives a great performance in here that I think enhances the performances around him, because another point we have to talk about is the fact that this deals a little bit, not as much as the new film, but definitely a bit about like Indy getting older. And I think you really kind of need that younger perspective to kind of mirror the older, because I think a lot of some of the humor and also just some of the action, you need that counterpoint to then explain why Indy isn't as polished as he used to be. He's a little older, a little scrappier. Or the kid's a little scrappier, so Indy himself is also a little different in comparison and context. So I think it also helps with that storyline too, of the whole like reflecting on age thing. And again, like the newest film I think does it a little bit stronger, or at least more prominently in the narrative.
Yes.
Talks about him getting older and reflecting on time and all that. But I really do think this film, having that younger presence and having Shia LaBeouf, who's a really good charismatic actor, helps bring out a lot of good stuff in Harrison Ford's performance in dealing with this new phase of Indy. You know, this is Indy with some arthritis, you know, like it's an older Indy than we're used to seeing. And I think you need that counterpoint, that younger counterpoint to help. And it helps with Karen Allen's stuff too. She's back here and she's great here. But a lot of the great stuff with her and Harrison Ford in this film is also due to Shia LaBeouf being that third person in the trio as well.
And the chemistry between Mutt and Marion is also really good. Like their performances are just really great. I think you really feel like they care about each other in this movie, which I think is really
I love
important.
that moment where she sees him for the first time and Indy thinks she's talking to him and she runs right past him and goes right to Mutt. Like, I love that because it shows everything you need to know without saying it, that she has animosity toward Indy, that she loves her son, and that they do have a strong bond. And then that's also where Indy kind of figures out the whole concept that she's his mother, and then by extension that he's her son. He doesn't find out he's his son later, but you know, like the wheels start turning that there's something more to this kid. And I think that's what's so great about that singular moment, is it conveys so much about the story and really propels it forward.
Yeah, this movie is really good at this is the writing really, but this movie is really good at insinuating the history of the new the secondary characters in this, so they don't have to tell you everything that's been going on, but they do and I guess it's not just writing, because it is direction and performances as well, where once we have all of them together, you feel like Marion and Ox and Mutt all have a history together, and you understand it, and you don't really have to question it or be explained exactly what's going on. So I think that he really succeeds in that, in showing that that relationship and that history really well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. Did you have other elements that you wanted to talk about for?
Yeah, well, I think another thing, and it always stems from a criticism, because for this episode, I really think a lot of it, the discussion of why we love it can stem from the discussion why others don't. And I think a lot of people don't love the writing, and I know we just gave credit to the writing, but I think the writing also, thinking about this evolution of Indy as a character, and I'm not talking about the plot writing, I'm talking about the dialogue itself. I think a lot of it, some people think it almost is a little too cheesy at times. There's a lot of dad jokes. But this is the movie where Indy's the dad. So, like, the dad jokes make a lot of sense. They're a little grown, a little cringe. But I think a lot of people know this. When they're around their older relatives, sometimes they're a little cringe. And I think that's also, like, a cool little tweak here, where Indy isn't as sharp. Or he's sharp, but in an old 30s way, that this new Indy just kind of sticks out as, like, kind of like, you know, he's cracking dad jokes. I actually really like that. I like that added element of adding just this new layer to Indy as a character, because you want to make the character evolve too. You're adding all these new characters, but you want to kind of give another layer to the character we already love, even though we think we know everything about him.
Right. I will also say that kind of cheesy dialogue and one-liners, not only is it just and I'm just going to harp on this forever, is the style they were going for. They've always been going for. It exists in the other ones too. In Last Crusade, when Henry Jones Sr. Squirts that guy with the eyes with the ink, and Marcus Brody goes, "The pen, Henry. The pen is mightier than the sword."
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That kind of stuff. It's cheesy dialogue is part of it. Like it's a part of the thing. I think that a lot of it comes down to they had hoped that, and here's a big thing, and I've heard it in the discourse with this new movie as well. And again, I unapologetically forever love these, and I won't hear a crossword about them. However, I will say that that I think people are hoping that these movies stay the same while keeping up with them as they progress. And these movies do that in a way, but they're never going that the movies are not going to have changed as much as you have changed since you first saw these movies. And they shouldn't, because if they did, they would be wildly different, and that's
Right.
You want them to be the same while also evolving, and that's what they're doing, but they're just not evolving in the way you evolved.
Right. Because also we're dealing with, the movies that were made in the 80s, but they weren't about the 80s. They were made about the 30s. So you've also kind of got this like double thing where it's like the technology of 2008 capturing a story from, what is it, the 60s, 50s or 60s,
50s,
but in the style of the films that came out in the 80s. So it's like you still gotta like juggle all these different things. And I think it does it pretty successfully. And like this new film's another, I don't want to talk too much about the new film, but another thing where like it's very clear about its time and its place, and you have to remind yourself, oh yeah, that's right, this is still a period piece. Even though Harrison Ford is old now, it's still not our present day, because Indy existed long ago. So I think that's another element to add as well.
They did try to in the young, it was called the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles back then, and now it's called The Adventures of Young Indiana Jones. When it originally aired on TV, the beginning and end of those episodes would start and end with old Harrison Ford telling the story to a young kid. Not old Harrison Ford, old Indiana Jones, because it was not Harrison Ford in the episodes. But it was meant to be modern day, which that was back in the way early 90s. So they did insinuate that those portions took place, but they've actually cut those parts out and made all of those episodes into like 21 movies, which are all on Disney Plus. And I'm about to dive headfirst into them. I used to watch it back in the day, but
I've never seen them, so
all.
I'm gonna have to watch it, because I'm not a full indie fan unless I have, I guess.
So anyway, you want to get into superlatives, or did you have anything else?
I think the superlatives will spark some other talking points as well, because on the show we do superlatives. We talk about worst this, worst that, worst this, worst that. And we're meant to still prop up these bad films as good films. So bad, they're good films. But this time, because of a redemption, Matt has altered the superlatives just a little bit to make it a little bit more positive, because ultimately we want to redeem this film.
We do. So we're going to, usually we do worst line of dialogue. Instead of this one, I want to talk about best line of dialogue. Again, we've talked about how there's a bunch of cheesy dialogue in this movie, or a bunch of cheesy writing and stuff like that. But to me, it's a strength. Dyl, do you have a best line of dialogue?
Yeah, this one really rang true to me, because it's an epic, like, kind of mic drop moment at the end of a really cool action set piece, or I guess in the middle of an action set piece. And then it kind of contextualizes a lot of what I think about when I think about this movie and the responses it gets, and like the whole kind of people do their own frameworks about like going through a rubric and saying, well, this is what doesn't work. This is what doesn't work. This is the worst line. This is the worst actor, and all this stuff. And the line I'm thinking of is, if you want to be a good archaeologist, you got to get out of the library. I love that line, because in the context of the movie, it comes after that like amazing moment where they go through the library with the motorcycle. We'll talk more on that later. Slide under the table, and then like the kid asks him a question. I love how like in the middle of this action set piece, he like takes a break to answer a question about archaeology, because he is a nerd, and I love it. And he has to answer, but then he doesn't give an answer. He just says, "Got to get out of the library," because that's, I think, a great epitomization of this film. It's like, you got to get your head out of what you expect and what you want and what this is supposed to be, and just enjoy it for what it is, and just get out there, like, just enjoy it, watch it, open your mind, because if you're sticking to the books, you're not going to go that extra evolution. If this film was just another film that felt like the films of the 80s made about this adventures and all that stuff, I don't think it would have been as good. I think because technology's evolving, they're taking bigger swings. Not all of them are working, but the big swings are being taken. They're out in the field. They're not in the library. Spielberg is out there. He is an archaeologist doing the dig himself. He's not reading things in a book. He's not playing it safe. And I think that's what this line means, which is just such a great parallel for the overall discourse of the film, I think. So that's what my favorite line was.
I think it's good. I really like that. I went with one that I think is a little bit cheesier, but also I think just really punctuates a scene, or at least I guess the scene wasn't over, but it really really sets the scene really well for me. And that is, well, first of all, I was gonna go with one that I also really like, and it's mostly because I like the way that Harrison Ford delivers it. Harrison Ford's one of my top 3 favorite actors of all time. I'm
He's
a huge
pretty
fan
damn
of
good.
his. But when Indy is talking to Irina about you're not from around here, are you? And she's like, "Where do you think I'm from?" And he says, "The way you're sinking your teeth into those W's." I would
Oh my
say
God,
Eastern
so
Ukraine.
that's kind of like the thing I was saying, like dad, like that's a silly thing to say, but it's so funny. It's so good. Such a
Yeah,
good delivery.
but that's not the one I went with. I went with the it was Irina. Irina, am I saying that right? Irina, when she's sword fighting or while she's dueling Mutt, and she says, "You fight like a young man, eager to begin, quick to finish." I just think it's just a good, like,
So
it's such a good, it's good repartee.
Yep.
It feels like it's from this movie. It perfectly encapsulated, in my opinion. It's very good.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
the
a nice
delivery.
section.
We haven't talked about Kate Blanchett yet, but she's great, and I love all the deliveries. You know, it's Lydia Tarr. You can't go wrong.
Yeah, she's great. Okay, let's talk about Best Actor. I've already said mine, and that is Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford's my guy, so my favorite actors of all time. I think he picks up the mantle of Harrison Ford, of Indiana Jones, and just gets right back in the fedora and is where it's at. I'm a huge fan of his performance in all of them. I like him in this one a lot. I think the acting in this is really good. So really anybody you pick is going to be the right answer. But for me, I just got to shout out Harrison Ford, my guy.
Yeah, like I'm trying to pick someone else just for the sake of being kind of not different, but just like adding more positivity. But I think it's him. I mean, I think he's the best one in this. I mean, Karen Allen's great, Shia LaBeouf, Kate Blanchett, they're all great. John Hurt has some cool moments in here. I think he's maybe the most underutilized in this, only because he can do so much more and his character's a little restrained. But I still like it.
If he hadn't done that switch and suddenly was better, like, because he spends most of the movie as like this madman, and you'd think like, okay, so that's a pretty good performance, and then he does that switch at the end, and suddenly you're like, so this is the character we've been missing the whole time.
Right.
Like, I feel like if he had been that more throughout the movie, he might have taken the whole thing, you know. But
but I'm going Indy. I mean, I'm going Harrison Ford. Like, it is the best performance in this, and I think no matter what qualms I have with the movies individually, he is always, I think, always the shining light. Like, he's never given a bad performance in this or in anything really, but like especially in this.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's talk about best scene. This is gonna. I don't remember what this is. I kind of at some point I stopped trying to correlate them.
Moment, right? Like,
well, that's not the frame. Instead of Framewreck moment, we're gonna do something else. This is the best scene. So which scene in this movie was the best? Do you have one, or do you want me to?
I have 2 that I was toying with, but because one of them, they're both 2 action set pieces that I love. One of them I think gets a little bogged down with some CGI to where I think the other one I'm gonna pick, and that is my favorite line is from. It's the motorcycle moment. I love. It's where you see the first instances of their bonding. I'm going from like the very beginning of the bar fight to the end of that chase, because like the bar fight's great, the way they initiate that, and you know, everyone starts punching each other and then they slip out the back and then they take on off the motorcycle, which is great because like you've never seen Indy on a motorcycle. I think that's just really freaking cool. And then just seeing them going through the library as well, because it's like they're not just outside, they're inside as well. I love a good chase sequence, especially in a new vehicle you've never introduced before. And then of course through the library, hitting that great line in the middle and then continuing to take off. Great stuff. I love that action set piece a lot. I love it. It's great character moment as well.
I agree. I think it's great. Them sliding under all of
so freaking cool. So cool.
of the tables.
And so well shot, so well orchestrated, choreographed, blocked. It's Spielberg and Kaminsky know what they're doing when they're making a movie, you know?
Yeah, that's a great scene. Mine actually might be the one that you decided not to go with, which is the jungle chase.
I mean, that was my other one, and I only didn't pick it because some of the CGI is like, all right, I can tell there's green screen there, but it doesn't hurt it. But I'd like you to talk about it because I know you love it too.
Yeah, you can tell that there's green screen through a lot of it. And as I mentioned before, I think that helps because I think that, you know, back in the day when they used to do these, they would put them in a car and they'd project the background on a screen behind them. And that's how it go. And that's kind of how this felt to me. And again, this kind of connects. So much of how I feel about this movie connects to the original intention of these movies. So that's how that kind of feels to me. So that's easy to wipe away. I also am not one who bad CGI unless it like really ruins a movie, doesn't ruin a movie for me. So I can easily overlook bad CGI most of the time. Unless it's kind of taking me out of it. And this one, it doesn't. So I love this scene from start to finish. It's very long. And you get a lot of just like classic adventure things. The sword fight on the cars, that's also where the swinging on the vines happens. You get car crashes. You get driving off a cliff, landing on a tree that puts you softly down into the water is so good. And then you fall over 3 waterfalls, which is not, I guess, the same scene. So we don't, I guess, but there's just so much in this scene that's just so fun. It's so much adventure. I can't imagine someone not just like having a great time. Recently, I said, I told people that in Dial of Destiny, the new one, I was smiling like an idiot the whole time. And that's true. I smiled like an idiot through this movie as well, but this movie or this scene when I was watching this movie had just like the biggest grin. And this is 2008. I still remember how much I was just like into this scene until the guy next to me started freaking out because he's afraid of bugs and then the ants scene happened. But
which is also just a great moment of horror. Like we don't get a ton of horror in the first 3 movies. I mean, a little bit in Temple of Doom, but like you get a lot of great like horror that is still palatable enough in the ant stuff. Like, oh my god, I love when he just gets like swallowed by the ants. It's amazing. Because it's like Spielberg can still do that too, and you sometimes forget because he makes family movies. But I think it's a great way to show, oh, I also got this bone in my body too. This horror fucked up, whatever. It's great.
All right, so instead of the train wreck moment of the movie, we're going to do, and this is the part where we're gonna be able to pick it apart just a little bit. We're going to talk about what they were right about. That's what we're doing here. So, what criticism that we have heard about this movie were they right about? Dylan? What were they right about?
I mean, I said it already, but the CGI for me at times, like I want to watch it again with the context of, oh, it makes sense with the style, but at the same time, it does, like I think they could have used a practical alien and it probably would have looked better for me personally and my taste personally. But really, there's not a ton that I really dislike. I really couldn't say, Matt. Honestly, really, there's nothing that's like glaring to where I'm like, just what a bad choice,
Yeah, I as far as the CGI, and I've already talked about it, and I think I'm a little bit more forgiving, so I don't really think that I don't think that anybody has to accept it the way I accept the CGI. I will say with the aliens, that was an issue I always had with the CGI of that scene and with the aliens. Watching it this time, though, I think it's just because so much is happening that it just kind of feels like it gets into like this animated thing during that. But when they first get in there and he is bringing the skull over to the skeleton without the head on it, and you see that crystal backbone just kind of hanging out there, that is a really cool shot. And that is like, this time I was like, I don't think those aliens are bad. I think they're actually kind of good. So, so I've kind of changed I used to have a big problem with that scene in particular with the CGI, but I've actually changed my tune on that. Gotcha. As far as my what they were right about, there's not a lot that I think they're right about, but I will say if I have to pick something, it's that if I'm ever taken out of this movie, it is because they are at times a little silly, for a little too silly. And there's a couple points where it's glaring, but I'm going to point out one that bothers me because I like Indiana Jones, am terrified of snakes. So the scene where he uses a snake to pull them up, I'm like, that is, number one, that's ridiculous. there are things all around. You're about to swing on some vines. Like there's things to use. That's ridiculous. It's a living thing. Like, come on, number one. Number two, the fact that he's just like, no, I'm not, call it a rope. Like, that's kind of funny, but also like, it's ridiculous. Like, I kind of wait for that scene to be over. Like, I'm just let's just get past it. Especially because I like that they are in a dry sand pit, and he specifies that it's not quicksand, and then kind of explains, quicksand isn't really that bad. This is actually what you're talking about when you're talking about it. So I like that he started to explain that, and that they differentiate between the dry sand pit and a quicksand, which is generally just mud, and it doesn't really it's not really dangerous. Yeah, so that scene I really like until it gets to the point where he's throwing a snake at him and trying to get him, and it's just to bring up the whole snake thing and for comedy, and it just does not work for me. And it's just little things like that a couple times in the movie are really the only things I can, if I'm reaching for something that I think they're right about, it's that.
There you go. There's one other thing that I thought about as you were talking that I don't hate, but I feel like if one character just feels like it's there to be there for plot and stuff, it's Ray Winstone's. Like, I don't really think he adds much value, and he's great as an actor, but like his character, I think more or less things would kind of play out the same. Like you could have someone, obviously he's the one who like sells Indy out and he betrays him and stuff, but I feel like we don't get enough of him as Indy's partner to really care that much about the betrayal, and to really want to see him redeemed at the end, to where when he like sacrifices himself and just lets himself go because of his greed. I wish almost there was one more film before this to establish Ray Winstone as this partner figure and someone that we actually like, so the betrayal hits more. Maybe if it was Sala who was doing this stuff, and obviously they would never make Sala evil, but you know what I mean. But like if it was someone we cared a little bit more about that was betraying him, I think it would hit a little harder, to where it's just this kind of added character that we know nothing about gets introduced only to betray him immediately. To them, we're supposed to be like, oh, how dare he? But we really just don't know him. And I know Ray Winstone mostly from Black Widow, so like I already don't trust him. So it's stuff like that where I'm like, I don't think that he needed to be there because he doesn't add a ton for me. But again, I think the performance is good, and I think they do find fun moments with him. But I don't think it necessarily needed to be this prominent arc. You know what I mean?
His only job was really to foil Indy at a couple places, and the fact that he gains Indy's trust back and then betrays him again, I think does it kind of betrays Indy's character a little bit. I think that it probably would have served better if he only turned on him once, and it was at the end. Like, we trusted him until we realized that he was leading them to the thing. Like, and then betrays him and says, "I'm sorry, it was for money," and then sacrifices himself there at the end to let them go. Like, that I think would have been better. So I agree that is another place where I think they might be right about. So let's get to the score. Usually it's how bad is it versus how entertaining it is, but in this case we're talking about a movie we like. So I'm going to say we're just going to score it based on how much we like this movie.
Yeah, so like genuine star rating.
Genuine star rating.
Yeah.
The redemption scale is what we'll call it, which is basically just how much you liked it. So where would you put this movie on a 5 scale? I can go first if you'd like.
Yeah, go first, because I'm settling between two. I don't know if I'm confident enough to say my second option.
Okay, so I love all these movies. I love the first and the third movie the most. To me, those are both 5-star perfect movies to me. The other three are just movies I really, really like. They're imperfect movies I really, really like, and that I love, that I absolutely love. So this one kind of falls in that range, which is probably maybe a little bit higher than most people would give it, even people who like it. But I do give this one a 3.5 out of 5.
Okay. You went lower than both the options I was toying with, but it's okay.
My.
Like, well, because I did a disclaimer earlier that like didn't really rewatch this franchise as a franchise till very recently. So like, I might be a little bit more positive on this overall than most people, and even more than you, I guess, by my score, which is I'm gonna settle on. I kept it easy. 8 crystal skulls out of 10. Like I really couldn't think of anything witty or memorable to say, but yeah, like I think it's really really solid. I think it's right on par with. I don't want to give a ranking right now because that's almost impossible. But like if Raiders is the best, and that's even just debatable to some. Like I think this is right on par with Last Crusade, vying for my number 2.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
To me, Last Crusade is my number 1. Then
Oh, cool. There you go.
Then Raiders, and then the new one, and then this one, and then Temple of Doom. But so yes, so that brings us to no need to do Mount Trash more because this isn't on there. This goes on the new Redemption Mountain or something.
Ooh, Mount Redemption. I like that. Redemption more. Mount Redemption more. There's
you can go up there with other movies we've redeemed.
So Indy's up there with who we putting him up there with? Freddy Krueger, Bella Swan, and Super Mario. Is that our Mount Redemption? Mount Redemption more.
Let's talk about next month. Next month we're actually doing a crossover extravaganza.
And we already did kind of mention on Picture This that Matt would be joining our show, Picture This, Chad and I's show, where we go through every Best Picture nominee in history, and we're doing the year 1989, because don't tell us what it is, but Matt's favorite film is part of that Best Picture slate, so we needed to have him on. But Matt, what is the twist to this little operation?
Well, after I'm on Picture This, covering that, we're going to have Chadwick Webb from Picture This over on our show, and instead of doing a movie, we're going to do a Framewreck version of Picture This, where we are going to talk about the worst movies of 2004, the film year 2004. We're going to do the Razzie Best or Worst Picture nominees for 2004, the Golden Raspberry.
The raspberries. Which is the equivalent of the Oscars, but for bad movies, for anyone who doesn't know what the Razzies are. We don't, the Razzies typically go for so bad it's bad, not really so bad it's good. They don't have fun with bad movies. They just like to tear them apart. But occasionally we come across slates where we're like, you know what, there's a few of those in there that are like so bad it's good. And we went with 2004 because the ultimate winner of 2004 is a film we've already covered on the show, so we know it's so bad it's good. Like we enjoy it because it's bad, and it'll be cool to just get another opinion on it. And that way, if the other 4 films are just flat out bad or actually good, we at least know that one is. So it's a good little test run. And then if this is good, we can go on and like do some more Razzie episodes in the future, have Chad on here. And of course we would have Matt back on Picture This. So it's going to be a cool little test to see if this format works. But we should say what those 5 films will be, because if you want to watch along, you can be part of the conversation. So here are the nominees for Worst Picture in 2004. For the 2005 Razzie. So movies released in 2004. We have Alexander, Catwoman, Super Babies, Baby Geniuses 2, Surviving Christmas, and White Chicks. So some pretty big ones in there. Some big ones for many different reasons. So those are the 5 films we'll be covering next month on Framewreck. Picture that. Maybe. I don't know. No, we won't change that name. Picture This, Picture That.
I will say that one of the movies that are nominated for Worst Picture in 2004, I legitimately like as a movie, not a bad movie. So, which we'll cover that in next month.
Yeah, obviously we both watched Catwoman because we did an episode on Catwoman, but we'll dive even deeper, and maybe our opinions have changed, and it'll be a third person's opinion, so it's not going to feel redundant because we'll get Chad's opinion on that. But also, there's only one other movie I've seen, and it was when I was very young. I had the DVD for Super Babies, which may be the only way you can watch it, people. So if you want to start watching now, go eBay yourself that $5 copy of Super Babies, or go to your library, Super Babies 2, if you want to partake in that conversation. But the other 4 films should be available elsewhere and pretty easily. But the other 3 films I haven't seen yet, so I'll be very interested to talk about.
Nice.
Yeah, cool. All right, so Matt, where else can they find you, though, if they want to continue to engage with you outside of Framewreck and Picture This and Draft?
You can find me anywhere on the internet under or at MattmanXIII, which you can see written right down there.
I never know which way to point. Yeah.
You can find me on this channel. I do a lot of stuff. Basically, if Dyl will let me be on camera, I'll do it.
And I just realized when I gave my score, I gave an 8 out of 10 instead of a 4 out of 5. I just realized I totally abandoned our whole score because I'm looking back in my head. I'm like, why did it sound so weird coming out of my mouth? Anyway, that's why. So thank you all so much. If you liked this whole idea of a Framewreck redemption, let us know in the comments below if you liked it. If you disagree with us, please, as we said, disagree with us, but be respectful of it. And if you're like, no, what, guys, I just like you talking about bad movies and actually talking about the badness of them, that's fine too, because we have other outlets. We can talk about good movies, Draft Day, Picture This, but also it's fun to change it up once in a while, just like Spielberg changed it up with this one while still staying true to the spirit of the show. And I feel like that's what we did. This is our Crystal Skull. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.
What a story, Mark.